The diplomatic chamber fell silent as the airlock hissed open, revealing what could only be described as a nightmare-given form. The creature that emerged defied every convention of biology the Galactic Council had ever encountered. It stood 12 feet tall, its obsidian carapace gleaming with an oily sheen that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. 8 spindly legs, each ending in razor-sharp talons, clicked against the metal floor in an arrhythmic percussion that made the assembled delegates' hearts skip beats. Its head was a grotesque fusion of insectoid and cephalopod, features compound eyes the size of dinner. Plates flanked a writhing mass of tentacles that dripped, with an acidic substance that hissed and steamed where it touched the floor. Ambassador Zeftari of the Valoran Union pressed herself against the far wall, her typically pale blue skin now completely colorless. The crystalline delegate, normally a being of pure geometric beauty, had compressed into the smallest possible configuration, a barely visible diamond of terror in the corner. Captain Thros, the grizzled military attaché from the Korthak Empire, reached instinctively for his weapon before remembering this was a diplomatic meeting. His forearms trembled as he tried to process what he was seeing. Even the AI representative, a floating sphere of pure logic and computation, seemed to stutter in its hovering pattern, its usually steady blue glow flickering erratically. The creature, calling itself something that translated roughly to the Devourer of Dying Suns, had arrived claiming to represent a species from the galaxy's darkest sector, the region every civilized race had agreed to quarantine after the last expedition returned with only one survivor, who spent his remaining days screaming about the things that feast on fear itself, as the Devourer spoke in a voice like grinding glass mixed with the death rattles of 1,000 worlds, describing its species' desire for mutual understanding and cultural exchange. The delegates found themselves paralyzed by primal terror. This was evolution's ultimate predator, a being that had climbed to the top of some nightmarish food chain that existed beyond their comprehension. Every instinct screamed at them to run, to hide, to pray to whatever gods they believed in, that this thing would simply leave and never return. Every instinct except one. In the back of the chamber, largely ignored by the other delegates as was typical for his young species, sat Marcus Chen, Earth's cultural attaché. While the others cowered in existential dread, Marcus leaned forward in his chair, studying the creature with the kind of intense focus usually reserved for particularly challenging crossword puzzles. The silence stretched on until finally, impossibly, Marcus raised his hand. "Excuse me," he said in the same tone he might use to ask about the weather, "but can I eat it?" The chamber erupted. "What?" Ambassador Zeftari shrieked, her translator struggling to convey the full spectrum of her horror. "The human has lost its mind," Captain Thros bellowed, all 4 arms gesticulating wildly. Even the AI's glow turned a confused yellow. "Query. Clarification needed on human statement." The Devourer itself paused mid-sentence, its compound eyes focusing on Marcus with what might have been confusion, if such a cosmic horror could experience something so mundane. Marcus remained perfectly calm, pulling out a small notebook and pen. "I mean, I'm not saying I necessarily want to eat it right now, but I'm curious about the flavor profile. The carapace suggests it might be similar to lobster, but that acidic secretion could add an interesting tang. Plus, anything that size probably has a lot of meat on it." He looked up at the stunned faces surrounding him and shrugged. "What, it's a valid question. On Earth, if it moves, somebody's probably figured out how to cook it. And if it doesn't move, well, we've probably figured out how to cook that too." The Devourer's tentacles writhed in what the universal translator interpreted as bewilderment mixed with nascent concern. You wish to consume me?" it asked, its voice losing some of its cosmic dread and taking on a distinctly uncertain quality. "Well, not you specifically," Marcus clarified, making notes. "I mean, you're obviously sentient and we're having a diplomatic meeting. That would be incredibly rude. I'm asking more from a theoretical culinary perspective. Like, what would your species taste like? What's your diet? Are you free-range or do you come from factory farms?" Ambassador Zeftari made a noise that her translator couldn't even attempt to render into standard galactic. Marcus continued, oblivious to the chaos around him. "See, humans have this thing where we look at basically everything and ask, how do I eat this? And it's gotten us in trouble before, sure, but it's also led to some amazing discoveries. Did you know that we figured out how to eat things that are literally poisonous just by cooking them the right way? There's this fish called fugu that can kill you if prepared wrong. But we eat it anyway because apparently mortal danger makes it taste better. The devourer took an unconscious step backward, its clicking footsteps less rhythmic now, almost nervous. Furthermore, Marcus said, warming to his subject, we've got this whole scientific discipline called molecular gastronomy, where we break food down to its basic components and rebuild it. I'm thinking your acidic secretions might work great as a natural meat tenderizer. Very innovative. Captain Thross had begun making what appeared to be religious gestures, though it was unclear if he was praying for Marcus's soul or trying to ward off evil. The human speaks of consuming cosmic horrors as if they were food items, the AI observed, its voice carrying a note that might have been awe. Everything's a food item if you're brave enough, Marcus replied cheerfully. My grandmother always said there's no such thing as weird food, just food you haven't figured out how to season properly. I bet with the right marinade and maybe a good sear on high heat. The devourer of dying suns, terror of the outer rim, nightmare of the quarantine zone, the thing that had sent entire fleets fleeing into hyperspace, made a sound that the translator rendered as nervous chittering. I believe this meeting has served its purpose, War, the devourer announced hastily. My species will consider cultural exchange at a later time, much later, perhaps never. As the cosmic horror retreated toward the airlock with considerably less majesty than it had entered, Marcus called after it, hey, if you change your mind, I've got some great recipes for shellfish. I'm thinking you'd go great with butter and garlic. The airlock sealed with unusual speed. In the aftermath, as the other delegates slowly began to breathe again, Ambassador Zeftari turned to Marcus with something approaching reverence. How? She whispered. How did you face that? That thing without fear? Marcus looked genuinely puzzled by the question. Fear? Why would I be afraid? It was just wondering if it was edible. That's normal, right? The silence that followed was different from before. Not the paralysis of terror, but the stunned quiet of beings trying to process that they shared a galaxy, with a species that looked at cosmic horrors and wondered about seasoning. Finally, Captain Thross spoke, his voice hushed with something that might have been admiration. Remind me never to accept a dinner invitation from a human. Marcus grinned and made another note in his book. Your loss. I make an excellent coq au vin. As the delegates filed out, still shaken, but oddly reassured by the presence of a species that apparently feared nothing as long as it couldn't figure out how to eat it, Marcus remained behind, staring thoughtfully at the spot where the devourer had stood. I wonder if they taste like chicken, he mused to himself, then shrugged and headed for the cafeteria. After all this talk about food had made him hungry.